The sun had barely risen over the jagged mountains of the distant planet when the human first saw it. The air shimmered with a strange, pale light, and the winds carried a faint metallic smell that made every breath feel heavy and unusual. The human had traveled far across galaxies, exploring worlds most beings had never even imagined. But nothing in all those journeys had prepared them for the sight they were about to witness dot in a narrow valley between two towering cliffs. A lone wolf staggered weakly through the underbrush. Its fur was matted and covered with tiny wriggling parasites that seemed to move as one mass, crawling over its skin, biting and sucking without pause. Its ribs showed sharply under the thin layer of fur, and each step seemed like a battle between life and exhaustion. The human's heart tightened immediately. They had seen many creatures in trouble before, but there was something different about this one. It was not just suffering. It was alone, abandoned, and utterly helpless. The wolf had wandered far from the safety of its pack. The human could see that its movements were uncoordinated, almost as if the parasites were sapping all its energy. Each paw left a small, weak print in the soft soil, and its head drooped lower with every passing moment. The human knelt behind a rock, observing quietly, understanding that any sudden movement could scare the wolf away or worse, provoke it into a desperate defensive attack. From a distance, a group of galactic aliens hovered above the valley in sleek, metallic ships. They were observing the wolf too, but their eyes were cold and clinical. They noted the parasite infestation, the weakness, the clear signs of imminent death, and then they made their decision. To them, the wolf was a failed experiment, a creature that did not meet their standards of survival. Without a second thought, they turned their ships and left the valley, leaving the wolf to its fate. The human felt a pang of anger and sadness watching this. They had always believed that any life, was worth saving. The aliens' indifference made the human's mission even clearer. If no one else was willing to act, they would. They moved cautiously down the rocky path, keeping a low profile to avoid startling the wolf. Each step had to be calculated. One wrong move, and the wolf, in its pain and fear, might attack. But the humans' experience with wild creatures had taught them patience and understanding as they drew closer. The wolf finally noticed them. Its eyes, a dull and cloudy yellow, locked onto the human. There was a flicker of fear, a primal understanding that this stranger might be dangerous. The wolf growled softly, more as a warning than an attack, and backed toward a cluster of jagged rocks, trying to put some distance between itself and the human. The human stopped immediately, speaking in low, gentle tones, offering no sudden movements. "It's okay," they said softly, though the wolf could not understand the words. It could, however, sense the calm in their presence, the lack of threat, and the genuine concern. The human crouched on the ground, making themselves appear smaller, less imposing. They could see the extent of the parasite infestation more clearly now. Small, white, wriggling creatures covered the wolf's neck, shoulders, and sides. Some were nestled deep into the fur. Others had burrowed into the skin, leaving red sores that oozed faintly. The wolf's condition was worse than the human had first imagined. Without immediate care, it would not survive another day. For a long moment, neither moved. The wolf's ears flicked nervously, tail tucked close to its body, muscles tense. The human simply waited, letting the silence stretch between them. It was a delicate dance of trust. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the wolf took a tentative step forward, drawn by the subtle presence of the human. Its body was tense, every muscle ready to bolt at the first sign of danger, but the human did not move. They reached into their satchels slowly, pulling out some clean water and a small portion of food. Placing it gently on the ground a short distance from them, they stepped back slightly to give the wolf room to approach. The wolf sniffed the air warily, eyes darting from the human to the food. Hunger won over fear. It crept forward, legs unsteady, and took the food in a quick, nervous bite before retreating to a safer distance. The human smiled softly, not out loud, just the faintest hint of satisfaction. This small act was a first step in breaking down the walls of fear and mistrust. The wolf was beginning to understand that this stranger meant no harm. Hours passed as the human stayed nearby, keeping an eye on the wolf, offering food and water whenever it felt safe to come closer. They could not risk moving too fast, not with the parasites weakening the wolf's strength. Each time the wolf came closer, the human felt a small victory, a reminder of why they had traveled so far to help creatures in need. As night began to fall, the temperature dropped rapidly. The wind howled through the valley, carrying sharp particles of dust that cut the skin. The wolf shivered violently, curling up into a small ball, trying to conserve what little warmth it had. The human pulled a small thermal blanket from their pack and, placing it near the wolf, whispered softly, "It's okay. You'll be safe tonight." The wolf looked at the blanket, eyes wide, and after a moment of hesitation, inched toward it, allowing the warmth to soothe its chilled body. The human stayed close through the night, eyes scanning the dark valley for any signs of danger. They could hear the distant hum of alien ships passing overhead, reminders that the wolf's abandonment had not gone unnoticed, but no one would intervene now. It was entirely up to the human. They checked the wolf's breathing, its pulse, and gently ran a hand through the matted fur, careful not to startle it. There was no aggression, only fatigue, fear, and a silent plea for help. By dawn, the wolf had shifted slightly closer, showing a small measure of trust. Its eyes, though still weary and clouded with pain, held a glimmer of hope. The human knew that the rescue would not be easy, that it would take days, perhaps weeks, to fully heal the wolf and remove the parasites. But the first step had been taken. The human's presence, their calm and steady care, had reached the wolf's heart in a way that words could never convey. And so, the valley, which had seemed so cold and unwelcoming, held a quiet moment of connection. Two beings, so different yet bound by the simple desire to survive and care, shared the same space. The aliens might have abandoned the wolf, but this human had arrived, determined to fight for its life, to prove that even in the darkest corners of the universe, compassion could still find a way. The day ahead promised challenges, but for the first time, the wolf was not alone. It had a protector, a friend, someone willing to face the harshness of the world alongside it. And for the human, the sight of the wolf, fragile, suffering, yet alive, was a reminder of why they traveled across galaxies, why they chose to intervene where others would not. The mission was clear: to heal, to protect, and to restore hope where it had been lost. As the sun rose higher, painting the valley in soft gold and purple light, the human began to plan the first steps of treatment. They knew the wolf would resist, that it would be a long and delicate process, but they were ready. With patience, courage, and unwavering care, they would not fail. The wolf had survived the cruelty of neglect and the harshness of parasites. But now, for the first time, it would experience kindness, safety, and the possibility of life renewed. In that quiet valley on a distant planet, a story of trust, bravery, and hope began not with grand battles or dramatic confrontations, but with simple, unwavering presence. A human and a wolf, connected in their shared struggle, had begun a journey that would change both their lives forever. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of minerals and wild grass from the surrounding valley. The human had spent the night beside the wolf, careful not to disturb it, but close enough to monitor its breathing and comfort it through the long, cold hours. As the first rays of light touched the wolf's fur, the human began to assess what needed to be done. The creature was alive, but its condition was still critical. Parasites covered its body in large numbers. Some burrowed deep into the skin, and its fur remained matted and dirty. The human knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, but they were determined. The wolf, sensing the human stirring, lifted its head slightly. Its eyes, still tired and wary, flicked toward the human. A low growl escaped its throat, soft but full of tension. The human froze for a moment, recognizing the wolf's instinctive fear. It was natural. The creature had been abandoned and mistreated, forced to fend for itself in a hostile environment. "I'm not going to hurt you," the human whispered, keeping their voice calm and steady. "I just want to help." The wolf did not move immediately. Its ears twitched, and it shifted slightly, trying to make itself appear smaller and less threatening. Slowly, it took a cautious step toward the human, drawn by the presence of food and safety. The human held out a hand, palm down, in a gesture of peace. It did not reach for the wolf or try to touch it yet. Trust had to be earned, step by step, especially with a wild creature that had known only neglect and suffering. The first order of business was hydration. The human carefully poured some clean water into a shallow dish, placing it within reach of the wolf. The creature sniffed the water, its nose twitching at the strange scent, and after a long pause, it lapped cautiously. The human watched silently, relieved to see that the wolf was drinking. Water was essential. The parasites were draining the wolf's strength, and dehydration could make the situation much worse. Next came the issue of food. The human had brought a selection of protein-rich supplements and specially prepared meat suitable for alien wildlife. They placed a small portion near the wolf, making sure not to force it to eat. Hunger would eventually encourage the wolf to eat, but pushing it too soon could cause stress or panic. The wolf sniffed the meat, backing away slightly before inching closer and taking a tentative bite. The human smiled softly, recognizing this small act as a victory. It was progress. With the wolf fed and hydrated, the human began to plan the next steps. Parasite removal would be difficult. The creatures were not only numerous, but also embedded deep into the skin in some areas. The human carefully laid out medical tools and antiseptics, ensuring everything was sterile and ready. They understood that the wolf would be frightened and defensive during treatment. Every movement had to be slow, deliberate, and reassuring. As the day progressed, the human attempted to approach the wolf more closely. They moved slowly, speaking softly, letting the wolf become accustomed to their presence. The wolf was wary, ears pinned back and muscles tense, but it did not flee. It was a small but important sign. The wolf was beginning to understand that the human's intentions were not harmful. The first attempts at cleaning the fur were met with resistance. The wolf snapped occasionally, showing frustration and fear, but the human never reacted with anger or force. Instead, they paused, giving the wolf space and time to calm down before resuming. Each moment of patience helped build a fragile bond of trust. The human understood that healing the wolf's body would require equal attention to healing its mind. Trauma and fear could not be ignored if the rescue was to succeed. By midday, the wolf had allowed the human to get close enough to inspect some of the worst areas. Large clusters of parasites were gently removed, and the skin was cleaned carefully with antiseptics. The wolf flinched and growled at times, but it did not run. The human noticed the wolf's breathing, becoming slightly more relaxed with each careful touch. A subtle but meaningful sign that trust was growing. During these hours, the human also observed the wolf's behavior and instincts. Despite its weakened state, it was alert, sensitive to sounds and movements, and cautious of any sudden changes. The human respected this. They did not try to dominate or control the wolf. Instead, they adapted to the wolf's pace, following its lead whenever possible. It was a dance of patience, understanding, and empathy, with each participant learning from the other. The aliens' ships could be seen in the distance from time to time, moving silently above the valley. They seemed to monitor the wolf's situation, though they made no attempt to intervene. The human ignored them, focused entirely on the task at hand. The wolf had been abandoned once, and it was clear that it could not rely on anyone else. The human's dedication was the only chance for survival. By late afternoon, the wolf had begun to show subtle signs of cooperation. It allowed the human to brush some of the matted fur, and it even leaned slightly into the touch, a small gesture of trust. The human recognized the significance of this. A wild creature that had faced neglect and suffering for so long was beginning to accept care and comfort. The wolf was slowly letting go of its fear, step by step. The human also took moments to rest near the wolf, speaking softly, sharing quiet company. They understood that the wolf's healing would not be purely physical. Emotional recovery was equally important. The wolf needed to learn that not all beings were cruel, that some could offer kindness without expecting anything in return. By remaining calm, patient, and gentle, the human provided that reassurance. As evening approached, the temperature dropped and the valley grew quiet. The human prepared a small sleeping area using thermal blankets and natural materials from the environment. They placed the blankets near the wolf, giving it the option to rest without feeling trapped or threatened. The wolf hesitated at first, but eventually settled down, curling slightly against the warmth. The human stayed nearby, ensuring that it remained safe and comfortable throughout the night. During these quiet hours, the human reflected on the journey ahead. Parasite removal would continue over several days, requiring patience, skill, and constant vigilance. The wolf's fear and mistrust would not disappear overnight. There would be setbacks, moments of frustration, and challenges that tested both the human's resolve and the wolf's endurance. But the human felt confident that together they could succeed. By the time darkness fully fell over the valley, a subtle transformation had occurred. The wolf, though still weak and wary, had begun to recognize the human as an ally rather than a threat. Its breathing was calmer, and it occasionally lifted its head to glance at the human, as if checking that they were still there. The human knew that trust had been established, fragile though it was. This small bond would become the foundation for everything that followed. Throughout the night, the human remained alert. Every sound, movement, and shadow in the valley was observed carefully. The wolf, despite its exhaustion, remained sensitive and tense. The human's presence, steady and reassuring, provided the security that the creature needed. This first full day of care had laid the groundwork for a true rescue, one that went beyond merely treating symptoms and instead focused on the holistic well-being of a living being in need. As dawn approached, the human prepared for another day of careful work. They knew that the wolf's survival depended not only on removing the parasites, but also on building a consistent, patient relationship. Every small action, offering water, providing food, gentle touch, and calm speech, contributed to the wolf's recovery. The human understood the responsibility they had undertaken and embraced it fully. The wolf, too, had begun to change. Its eyes, once dull and lifeless, now held a faint spark of recognition and cautious curiosity. Its body, though still weak, responded to gentle guidance and care. For the first time since being abandoned, the wolf experienced safety, comfort, and hope. And for the human, this moment marked the beginning of a journey that would test their patience, skill, and compassion, but also one that promised the reward of saving a life that had been written off as hopeless. The valley, once silent and lonely, now held a quiet connection. A human and a wolf, two beings from different worlds, shared the same space in mutual understanding. The journey of healing had begun, and both knew that it would be long, challenging, and transformative. But in that moment, trust had taken root, and with it, the possibility of survival, friendship, and a new beginning. The sun had barely begun to rise, spilling a soft golden light across the jagged valley, when the human began preparing for the day's work. Today was the most critical part of the rescue. The wolf had eaten and drunk the previous day, and the first signs of trust were visible. Now, the human knew it was time to carefully begin removing the parasites and treating the injuries that had plagued the creature for so long. Every step had to be done with patience, precision, and gentleness. One wrong move could undo all the trust they had built. The wolf watched cautiously from a short distance, ears pinned back and muscles tense. Its breathing was slow but uneven, betraying both exhaustion and wariness. The humans sat quietly on the ground, speaking softly to the wolf, their voice calm and even, a rhythm that had begun to soothe the wild animal. They carefully prepared. Their tools, small tweezers, antiseptic solutions, soft brushes, and clean cloths, all laid out neatly on a portable tray. Everything had to be ready before approaching the wolf, because hesitation or fumbling could alarm it. Slowly, the human approached. They kept their body low, movements deliberate, and eyes soft, avoiding any sudden gestures. The wolf did not move away this time. It had grown accustomed to the human's presence, though fear still lingered in every muscle. The human extended a hand, palm down, in a gentle gesture of reassurance, and whispered soothingly. The wolf's ears twitched, and for a brief moment, it froze, as if deciding whether this human could be trusted enough to allow touch. The first contact was small and careful. Using one hand, the human gently brushed a patch of the wolf's fur, removing some of the loose parasites that wriggled on the surface. The wolf flinched at first, but did not run. Slowly, the human worked in short, calm strokes, giving the wolf time to adjust. They paused frequently, speaking softly, letting the wolf know it was safe. This was not only a physical treatment, but also an emotional one. Every gentle touch reassured the wolf that this time it was not alone. Hours passed. The process was slow, painstaking, and sometimes frustrating. The parasites clung stubbornly to the wolf's fur and skin. Some had burrowed deep, leaving small sores that oozed and stung. The wolf occasionally growled, a low warning sound that made the human freeze immediately. They did not respond with force or frustration. Instead, they waited, allowing the wolf to calm itself before continuing. Patience was the key. Trust could be broken with even the slightest aggression. Throughout the morning, the wolf gradually began to show signs of cooperation. It allowed the human to remove parasites from its shoulders and back, though it still flinched whenever the human touched sensitive areas. The human used soft cloths and antiseptic solutions carefully, gently cleaning sores and applying treatments to prevent infection. The wolf's breathing became slightly more steady, and there were moments when it leaned into the touch, a small but meaningful sign that trust was deepening. The human also paid close attention to the wolf's reactions and emotions. They spoke softly, narrating their actions in calm tones, almost like telling a story. "I'm cleaning you now. It will feel strange, but it won't hurt long. You are safe here." Though the wolf did not understand the words, it sensed the intent behind them. The human's presence, calm voice, and steady movements created a sense of safety, a stark contrast to the fear and abandonment the wolf had known before. By midday, significant progress had been made. Many of the surface parasites had been removed, and the human had treated several of the most infected areas. The wolf, though still tense, seemed to accept these actions were not a threat. It occasionally licked the human's hand or nudged. It gently, small gestures of trust that encouraged the human to continue. Every parasite removed was a victory. Every calm interaction a step toward full recovery. The aliens' ships were visible in the distance, silent observers above the valley. Their metallic forms reflected the sunlight, but they made no attempt to intervene. The human ignored them, focusing entirely on the wolf. These creatures might have abandoned the wolf, but the human's mission was clear: survival, healing, and trust. The presence of others did not distract or deter them. The wolf's life depended on consistent care and attention, and nothing else mattered in that moment. The afternoon brought more challenges. Some of the parasites were deeply embedded, and their removal caused discomfort for the wolf. It yelped softly, a sound that made the human's heart tighten, but they remained calm, speaking in reassuring tones and pausing when necessary. Each reaction from the wolf was treated with care, never frustration. The human had learned that rushing or forcing anything could break the fragile bond they had built. Healing required respect for the wolf's limits and patience beyond measure. After several hours of careful work, the wolf finally began to relax slightly. Its breathing grew more regular, and its body became less tense. The human allowed short breaks, offering water and food in small amounts to keep the wolf nourished. During these pauses, they observed the wolf closely, noting which areas were still infected and which had healed slightly. Progress was visible, and with each success, the human felt a growing sense of hope. That evening approached, and the human knew it was time to prepare for the night. They gathered the remaining tools, cleaned them, and organized supplies for the next day. The wolf had endured a full day of treatment, yet it had survived. Its fur, though still matted in some areas, was noticeably cleaner, and several sores had been treated. The wolf's eyes, once clouded and dull, now reflected a faint glimmer of awareness and cautious trust. The human prepared a small resting area with blankets and soft natural materials. They placed it near the wolf, allowing the creature to choose its position. The wolf hesitated briefly, then curled up near the blankets, settling down. The human stayed close, keeping watch through the night, ready to respond if the wolf showed signs of distress or discomfort. Their presence was a silent promise that the wolf would not face the night alone again. Throughout the night, the human reflected on the day's progress. It had been exhausting, demanding not only physical skill, but emotional patience. The wolf's suffering had been immense, and yet, in a single day, progress had been made. Trust had been nurtured, bonds had begun to form, and hope had taken root. The human knew that the coming days would continue to test their resolve, but they also knew that the wolf was resilient. Its spirit, though weakened, had not been broken. As dawn approached, the first light of day revealed a wolf that was tired but alive, its body slightly cleaner, and its spirit noticeably stronger. The human prepared for another day of careful work, determined to continue the treatment, strengthen trust, and remove the remaining parasites. Every movement, every gesture, every word of reassurance mattered. The wolf had survived abandonment and neglect, and now it would survive with care, patience, and love. The valley, once silent and cold, had become a place of healing. A human and a wolf, two beings from different worlds, were connected by shared struggle and mutual understanding. The journey was far from over, but the first true step toward recovery had been taken. The wolf had endured a full day of treatment, showing resilience and bravery, and the human had provided the guidance, skill, and compassion needed to make that possible. This day marked a turning point. The wolf had survived the critical phase, and trust had grown stronger. The human understood that every small action, gentle touch, careful removal of parasites, soft words of reassurance, was shaping the wolf's recovery not just physically, but emotionally. Healing required time, patience, and unwavering care, and both the wolf and the human were committed to this journey. The wolf slept through the night, curled safely among the blankets, muscles finally relaxing after a long day of care. The human stayed nearby, vigilant yet quiet, knowing that the bond they had nurtured would be tested again in the days to come. But for now, there was relief, hope, and the quiet understanding that the wolf had a chance at life again. And so, in the fading light of day and the quiet of night, the first true rescue had taken place. The wolf, once abandoned and suffering, had experienced care, patience, and trust. The human had proven that even in the harshest conditions, life could be protected, nurtured, and healed. This was not the end, but the beginning of a journey that would continue to challenge, test, and ultimately transform both lives forever. The morning sun poured its golden light over the valley, revealing the wolf's figure resting among the blankets. Its breathing was steady, and its eyes, once dull and clouded, now reflected alertness and cautious curiosity. The human had spent several days caring for it, slowly removing parasites, cleaning wounds, and offering nourishment. Each day had been exhausting, yet the progress was remarkable. The wolf had survived the worst of its suffering, and now a new phase of recovery had begun. The human sat nearby, observing the wolf as it slowly rose to its feet. Its legs, still thin but stronger than before, carried its weight steadily. The wolf moved cautiously at first, stretching and flexing muscles that had been weakened by days of illness and parasites. The human spoke softly, encouraging the wolf, without pushing it, letting it know that movement and exploration were safe. The wolf sniffed the air, ears flicking back and forth, but it stayed close to the human. Trust had grown, fragile but firm. After several days of careful treatment, the wolf began to eat more confidently. The human provided meat and protein-rich supplements, gradually increasing portions as the wolf's strength returned. Each meal was an opportunity to reinforce trust. The wolf would approach cautiously, sniff the offering, and then eat, often glancing at the human to ensure that they were near and watchful. These moments were small but meaningful, showing the human that the wolf had begun to understand care, safety, and companionship. The parasites were nearly gone now, leaving only a few stubborn ones that required careful attention. The wolf had tolerated the cleaning and treatment remarkably well, no longer flinching or growling at every touch. The human had been patient, working slowly and gently, letting the wolf dictate the pace. This patience had been essential. The wolf was not only healing physically, but also emotionally, beginning to accept that it could rely on someone for protection and care. As the day progressed, the wolf began to explore its surroundings more confidently. It stepped over rocks and uneven ground with ease, sniffing at plants and the soil, testing its regained strength. The human followed at a distance, careful not to crowd the wolf, speaking softly to reassure it. The wolf would glance back occasionally, as if checking that the human was still there, and then continue its exploration. A subtle bond had formed between them, one built on mutual respect and trust. The human also took time to observe the wolf's behavior and instincts. Even though it had been weakened by illness, the wolf remained alert, intelligent, and cautious. It listened to sounds in the valley, sniffed the wind, and reacted to subtle movements around it. The human recognized that healing the wolf did not mean stripping away its natural instincts. Instead, they aimed to strengthen the wolf's body and spirit while respecting its wild nature. By midday, the wolf had begun to show playful behavior, a sign that it was regaining not only strength, but also confidence and joy. It pounced at small rocks, chased the wind-blown leaves, and sometimes barked softly in a sound that was more curiosity than aggression. The human watched with a smile, recognizing these moments as proof of recovery. The wolf's spirit, once dimmed by suffering and abandonment, was reigniting. The aliens' ships continued to hover in the distance occasionally, silent witnesses to the wolf's transformation. Their presence, once intimidating, now seemed irrelevant to the human and the wolf. The human had proven that compassion and patience could overcome indifference and neglect. The wolf's recovery was no longer a question of survival, but a testament to the power of care and dedication. In the late afternoon, the human and the wolf sat near a small stream that ran through the valley. The wolf drank eagerly, its eyes bright and alert, and then shook its body, sending droplets of water flying. The human laughed softly at the sight, feeling a deep satisfaction in seeing the wolf regain its vitality. After drinking, the wolf settled down beside the human, resting its head on the human's lap for a brief moment before standing and exploring again. This trust, once unimaginable, had become real. As evening approached, the human prepared food and water for the wolf and offered a safe resting area with blankets. The wolf, now stronger and more confident, lay down comfortably, occasionally nudging the human for reassurance. Over these days, a rhythm had developed. The human provided care, the wolf responded with trust, and both had learned to coexist peacefully. It was a partnership, fragile at first, now growing stronger with each passing day. The human also began to speak to the wolf more directly, not as commands, but as gentle conversation. "You've come a long way," they whispered. "You're strong now. You can explore, run, and play. You're safe here." The wolf listened, its ears twitching, as if understanding the tone and intention behind the words. It was clear that the wolf had begun to associate the human with safety, care, and kindness, concepts foreign to it just days ago. Night fell over the valley, bringing cool air and a quiet calm. The wolf curled up near the human, its breathing slow and steady. The human remained alert, watching over the wolf, ready to respond if it moved or showed signs of discomfort. The bond between them had grown so strong that the wolf seemed almost to recognize the human as a protector and companion. For the first time since being abandoned, it felt secure and cared for. The human reflected on the journey so far. The wolf had endured so much suffering, yet it had survived and now thrived under patient care. The process had been slow, requiring attention to both physical and emotional needs, but the results were undeniable. The wolf was no longer just surviving. It was beginning to live again. Its movements were fluid, its eyes bright, and its behavior playful and curious. Trust had been established, and healing was well underway. Over the next few days, the wolf continued to grow stronger. It explored further, tested its endurance, and began to engage more actively with the human. Small gestures of affection, like nudging the human's hand or brushing against their leg, became more frequent. The human understood that these were signs of trust and attachment, evidence that the wolf had accepted their care and companionship. The human also prepared the wolf for life beyond the valley. They began encouraging the wolf to exercise, run, and strengthen its muscles. Every movement, every game of chase or exploration was a lesson in independence and confidence. The wolf responded eagerly, sometimes returning to the human for encouragement or reassurance. It was clear that a deep bond had formed, one that combined trust, respect, and mutual understanding. One morning, the human noticed a remarkable change. The wolf's coat, once matted and dull, now gleamed with health. Its eyes were sharp and clear, full of life and curiosity. The wolf moved with grace and confidence, running across the valley floor, leaping over rocks, and testing its strength against the wind. The human felt a surge of pride and relief. The wolf, once abandoned and on the brink of death, had returned to its natural vitality. The aliens, who had abandoned the wolf initially, observed silently from a distance. Their indifference had once been absolute. But now they witnessed something they had not anticipated, a creature thriving because of compassion, patience, and care. The human had shown them that life, no matter how weak or neglected, could be restored with dedication and empathy. By evening, the wolf had developed a rhythm with the human. It followed the human at a short distance, exploring and playing, but always returning for guidance and reassurance. The bond was now undeniable. The wolf had learned to trust, to rely on the human's presence, and even to show affection in small ways. It was no longer a creature abandoned and broken. It was strong, confident, and alive. As night fell, the valley was quiet, except for the soft sounds of the wolf breathing and the human settling beside it. The wolf curled up comfortably, its head resting near the human's lap, a silent gesture of trust and connection. The human placed a gentle hand on its back, feeling the warmth and strength beneath the fur. In that moment, the bond between them was complete. The wolf had survived the darkness of neglect and illness, and the human had given it a new life. The journey of healing had transformed both lives. The wolf had gained strength, confidence, and trust. The human had experienced the deep satisfaction of saving a life, of seeing suffering replaced with vitality and hope. Together, they had overcome fear, pain, and indifference, proving that care and compassion could create miracles even in the harshest environments. The night passed quietly. The wolf slept soundly, breathing evenly and untroubled. The human stayed close, vigilant but calm, knowing that the next steps would involve guiding the wolf toward independence and freedom. The bond they had formed, built on trust, patience, and love, would carry them through the challenges ahead. The wolf's journey was no longer one of survival alone. It had a companion, a protector, and a friend. The human's presence had transformed its life, showing that even in the face of neglect and abandonment, recovery and trust were possible. As dawn approached, both the wolf and the human were ready to face the next chapter together, stronger, braver, and more connected than ever before. The sun rose gently over the valley, bathing the landscape in soft golden light. The wolf stretched, shaking its fur and flexing its muscles, strong and agile now. The days of sickness, parasites, and weakness were behind it. Its eyes sparkled with life, clear and bright, full of intelligence and curiosity. The wolf had grown stronger every day, and it now moved with the grace and power that all healthy wolves possessed. The human watched closely, heart full of pride and relief. This was the moment all their effort, patience, and care had led to the moment when the wolf was truly thriving. The bond between the wolf and the human was now unmistakable. The wolf stayed close, following the human from a short distance as they explored the valley together. It ran and leaped over rocks, chasing shadows and leaves blown by the wind. Yet it would always pause to glance back, checking that the human was still near. Every interaction between them was a mix of independence and trust. The human had given the wolf safety and care, and in return, the wolf had offered loyalty, companionship, and recognition of that care. The valley, once silent and harsh, was now filled with subtle sounds of life. Birds chirped in the nearby trees, the stream gurgled over smooth stones, and the wind rustled through the grass. The wolf moved through this environment with confidence, its senses alert, its instincts sharp. The human observed, allowing the wolf freedom while remaining ready to step in if danger appeared. There was no need to rush or force anything. The wolf had recovered not only in body but in spirit, and its confidence grew with every step it took in the valley. Food and water were no longer a challenge. The wolf ate eagerly, enjoying each meal with energy and vigor. It had regained its natural appetite, and the human continued to provide nourishment carefully, ensuring a healthy diet. These moments also strengthened the bond between them. The wolf had learned that the human's presence was associated with safety and sustenance, and it responded with gestures of trust. Sometimes it nudged the human gently. Sometimes it laid down nearby after a meal, resting calmly instead of pacing in fear as it had in the past. The human also encouraged the wolf to explore further. Over time, the wolf ventured farther from the resting area, investigating the streams, rocks, and small clearings in the valley. Each time it returned, it would brush against the human, almost as if sharing its discoveries and seeking reassurance. The human smiled softly each time, understanding the significance. The wolf had not only survived, but it had also regained the curiosity, energy, and joy of a healthy creature. Days passed, and the wolf continued to grow stronger. Its coat had regained its natural sheen, soft and shiny in the sunlight. Its eyes were alert, and its body was now muscular and agile, capable of running, jumping, and climbing with ease. The parasites were completely gone, and the wounds had healed fully. The valley that had once seemed dangerous and lonely now felt like a place of opportunity, safety, and freedom. The human and wolf had transformed it together into a place of healing and life. One morning, the human noticed a change in the wolf's behavior that marked the final stage of trust and loyalty. The wolf approached the human without hesitation, rubbing its head gently against their hand. It lingered, nuzzling and seeking attention, showing a deep connection that had grown over days of care and patience. The human felt a warmth in their chest, realizing that the wolf had accepted them, not just as a source of safety, but as a companion, a friend. This bond was rare, forged through empathy, trust, and mutual respect, and it filled the human with pride and satisfaction. The aliens, who had once abandoned the wolf, occasionally appeared in the distance, observing silently. Their attitude had been indifferent, but now they witnessed a transformation that went beyond mere survival. The wolf had thrived under human care, demonstrating strength, health, and vitality. The human's patience, dedication, and compassion had created something the aliens could not fully understand, an emotional bond and recovery that went beyond the physical. The wolf was no longer a weak, abandoned creature. It was a living proof that care and trust could overcome neglect. With the wolf fully recovered, the human began planning for its future. Though the valley was safe and rich with food, it was important that the wolf had freedom to roam and a place to thrive without human dependency. The human prepared a path toward a larger, protected habitat, one that would allow the wolf to explore, hunt, and interact naturally, while still being safe from predators and harsh environmental threats. The wolf seemed to sense this change, moving confidently and looking toward the horizon, as if understanding that a new chapter awaited. The wolf's behavior reflected both independence and loyalty. It explored the edges of the valley, climbed small hills, and tested its strength in running and hunting simulations, yet it always returned to the human. Sometimes it would lie down nearby, resting while the human worked or observed, showing a calm, trusting presence. This behavior was proof of the deep bond that had formed, a bond built on care, patience, and shared experience. The wolf had not only recovered physically, but emotionally. It had learned to trust and to love again. The human also reflected on the journey. It had been long and challenging, requiring careful observation, patience, and an understanding of the wolf's needs. Every moment mattered: gentle touches, soft words, offering food, providing water, and allowing freedom to explore. Each act of kindness had contributed to a full recovery, proving that one being's care could transform another's life. The wolf's journey from weakness and neglect to strength and loyalty was a testament to the power of compassion. One day, the human sat near the stream, watching the wolf leap and run in the sunlight. Its energy was boundless, and its eyes gleamed with life. The wolf paused occasionally to look back at the human, as if saying silently, "Thank you for saving me." The human smiled, feeling a deep connection that went beyond words. It was not just a rescue, it was a transformation of life, a new beginning forged through empathy and dedication. As the sun set, the human and wolf sat side by side, overlooking the valley. The wolf lay down calmly, resting its head near the human's lap. The air was quiet except for the soft rustling of leaves and the distant sound of the stream. The bond between them was now complete. The wolf had regained health, strength, and spirit, and the human had achieved what they had set out to do. The wolf would never again face abandonment, neglect, or suffering alone. The human knew that the wolf's story would continue, one of freedom, exploration, and loyalty. The valley would remain a sanctuary where it could thrive, and the bond between them would endure. The wolf had returned from the brink of death, transformed into a strong, confident, and independent creature. Yet it carried with it a connection to the human who had saved it. This connection would guide the wolf through life, providing trust, companionship, and the knowledge that care and kindness could exist even in a harsh universe. Night fell over the valley, peaceful and calm. The wolf slept soundly, a stark contrast to the weak, parasite-ridden creature it had been days before. Its body was strong, its mind alert, and its spirit free. The human remained nearby, watching over the wolf with quiet satisfaction, knowing that their mission had been accomplished. The wolf had survived the darkness of neglect, the pain of sickness, and the despair of abandonment. Now it thrived, alive in every sense of the word. The next morning, the wolf was ready to explore even further. Its strength, confidence, and agility had returned fully. The human watched it run through the valley, chasing the wind, leaping over rocks and climbing hills with ease. The wolf occasionally glanced back, ensuring the human was following, a sign of loyalty and trust. It was clear that the wolf had formed a permanent bond with the human, one based on care, patience, and understanding. The human felt a sense of fulfillment unlike anything else. Saving the wolf had not only restored life to a suffering creature, but had also demonstrated the power of empathy and dedication. The wolf had become a living symbol of resilience, recovery, and the transformative nature of compassion. The human knew that wherever life took them next, the memory of this bond would remain forever, a reminder that even in the harshest conditions, care could create miracles. Over the following days, the human and the wolf continued to explore the valley together. The wolf hunted small prey, tested its agility, and enjoyed the freedom of a safe environment. Yet it always returned to the human, resting nearby and seeking gentle interaction. This balance of independence and loyalty was the culmination of their journey, proof that the wolf had regained not only health, but also the ability to trust and love again. As time passed, the wolf became a strong, vital, and confident creature. Its coat shone, its eyes sparkled, and its movements were graceful and purposeful. The human had succeeded in transforming a life once on the edge of death into one filled with vitality, hope, and trust. The bond they had formed was unbreakable, built on patience, care, and unwavering empathy. The wolf would never be alone again. In the quiet of the valley, under the fading light of evening, the human and the wolf sat together, enjoying the peace and companionship they had created. The wolf leaned gently against the human, its breathing slow and calm. It was a simple moment, yet it held the weight of transformation, trust, and life restored. The journey F